I wanted to share Rita's story for the next campaign for other families to find their loved ones, to help other countries to jump on board, because if it wasn't for this first campaign, I would have never have found Rita, and she would have been lost forever because it was a different country she was found in.
Before we get into the campaign and the result of the campaign, can you first tell me something about your sister Rita? What kind of person was she?
Oh, she was, Rita was tough, independent woman, and she took no nonsense. She stood up for her family and friends. If anyone did her wrong, she would stand up for herself. But equally, she was joyful personality. Her life was full of colour, and she brought colour into my younger life, and she'll always be the part of the person I am today.
You gave me a video of you and Rita. How old were you at the time?
That was in 1985, and it was Rita and myself. I was 23, she was 25.
Oh, you're kicking it!
And as you can see in the video, we're joking around because there was no cameras in that day and age. It was like a treat to have something like that. So I'm blessed to be able to show this video of Rita. But yeah, we were just having family time and a good laugh.
And then in the early 90s, she went to the Netherlands, but you were still in contact, right?
We were in contact with each other through letters. And she was in Amsterdam or Rotterdam, because they are the addresses that I have for her. So we communicated to in and fro in, and the same as my mum in the early 90s as well.
And what can you tell about that time?
She had gone over there. She'd been over there many times before, and she left Cardiff and she was going over there. I'd moved away from Cardiff, so she was still writing to me, but I'd moved away from Cardiff and started a new life. And I believe she was meeting up with somebody there that she was in correspondence with at that time.
In May 1992, you received a lost postcard, and then the communication stopped. When did you realize that something was wrong?
Oh, now Rita was needy, okay? So if we didn't earn anything within about 3 weeks, there was, right, where is she? What's she doing? What's she up to? Then we'd let it go. Then me and my mum were corresponding with each other, because obviously I've moved out of Cardiff. You heard from Rita? No, and so on and so forth. So yeah, we looking at the paperwork now, I can see the timeline. But my mum had concerns because there was a crash in Amsterdam where a plane went into a building. And because we hadn't heard anything from Rita at that stage, we wondered whether she had been a victim in that block of flats. So that we sat with for quite a while, and time just ticked away.
How hard was it not to know exactly what had happened to her?
It was easy to think that she died in that aeroplane crash than to let your mind go to dark places, which I've got to say I did over the years, because that's why I looked and never gave up hope. But for me, people used to say, you know, have you heard from Rita? And I'd say, no, I know she's dead. You know, she was needy. We would have heard from her now. You know, it was just easy to think like that than it was to let your mind go to other areas, because we wouldn't go to the police because of the circumstances she left Cardiff. I come from a culture where you didn't go to the police to get her into trouble. So that was never the thing at that time, you know.
Somewhere you always kept believing, or kept the option open that she didn't die in that plane crash, because you kept looking for her.
There was always a gut feeling, because my mind used to say, okay, so if the plane crashed into a building and the fuel, because this is where your mind takes you, burns the whole building. Is there any way that these bodies can be identified? Or maybe she wasn't. Maybe she's had enough of the family. She's gone. She's married this person. She's gone to have children. She's got on with her own life. Then you heard whispers saying, oh, I seen her in Morocco. People saying things that set you on a different track.
You did try to find Rita in the 90s. How did you try to do that?
Well, I didn't go to the police, put it that way, but what I did do was ring missing persons, which was at that time the Salvation Army, on 2 separate occasions in the late 90s. Then further down the line, I had some official documents from a solicitors in Rotterdam, and I rang them and asked could they give me some information on Rita, but they couldn't because of data protection, so I didn't get any further with that. And then I rang a couple of years later in Crime Watch, where a body was found in the Thames in a suitcase, and they'd already identified the body. But because there's a torture surrounding it, because with the addresses in Rotterdam and Amsterdam, because we have internet now, my husband Googled it and he showed me the buildings and I went into a meltdown. It gave me a reality of, whoa, this is heavy, it really upset me. For the next few years, I used to go online and I used to go on these different websites looking at sort of deceased and, unidentified bodies and stuff like that, and never recognised anything, or, sometimes you didn't even know what you were looking for, but it was just hope. I had hope there was something there. I don't know what it was. And I kept her alive with my daughter and my husband, and I had, my daughter, my daughter knows everything about her. I have family that knows everything about her, never met her. So initially when all this came out, my daughter knew her story, and it was my daughter that found her.
Yeah, because can you take me back to that day? How was that day for you? The day of the launch of the campaign?
Martin, honestly, I that day, I was gardening, I got a call. She said, do you want to go into the house and I've sent you an app? And then she started reading Operation Identify Me. And all that stuck in my head at that time was 22 women, murder. So I thought immediately in my head, serial killer. So she said, take a look at the link I've sent you, which is specific links specifically for Rita's tattoo. And immediately I couldn't breathe. I had to sit down. My body just shook. My brain was telling me, no, that's not her. She's got a red rose. It's not a black rose. But I just couldn't breathe. I just couldn't. And I broke into tears. We're crying. It was very emotional. But your brain is in denial. No. So I finished the conversation, and then I went to a friend of mine that knows Rita for 40 odd years. And I spoke to her and she said, no, Don, it was a black rose. And that really confirmed it for me. But your brain is telling you no, until you go through the process of, identifying her. And what if it's this? Because your mind just spirals off everywhere. What I didn't envisage, the cruel way that she was murdered. And I think that just has taken me down a rabbit hole.
Yeah, because you learned that she wasn't in the Netherlands, she was found in Antwerp, and that she was murdered.
Yeah. The day I learned that Rita was murdered has put me into a trauma state. I was absolutely blown away that this had happened to her. It was the furthest thing from my mind. And I am still working through this trauma and the case.
It's still unclear who murdered your sister. How is that for you, not to know who did this to her?
It's important that we try, after all these years, to find out who did this to her. Somebody knows something out there, and it's important that we still pursue it.
Yeah. You just told me how hard it also was to learn what have happened to Rita. It sent you into a rabbit hole. But can you also tell me how important it is that you do know now what has happened to her?
Oh, you know what? I absolutely was overwhelmed with the beautiful place that she's resting in now. And I know where she is. I know I don't have all them thoughts and triggers that I've had over the X amount of years. And when they do come, I know where she is. She's at peace. She's at rest. And that for me it means a lot, because like I say, it was easier to think she'd died all them years ago than to think, you know, your mind plays so many tricks with you and so many bad thoughts would come into it over her that it was just easier. So you came to terms with the fact that she's passed on, but it's coming to the terms of how she passed on, and then coming to the terms with where she is now, and she's at peace, and that is most important.
How important do you think it is that countries, together with Interpol, are trying to identify these women, even after all these years?
Oh my God, Martin, I cannot believe that this black notice was only circulated in the police. The public, it's important for these things to be out in the public so the public can help. This is an era of the internet and information. When Rita went missing in 1992, there was no mobile phones, there was no internet. So listen, this is information that needs to be shared. You know, I didn't know that there was such a thing called iFamiliar, that you could go and give you know, kinship could go and give their DNA to help find their missing loved ones. I didn't even know that was there. It was only since finding Rita I found out all this information. So it is important that these things are shared. You know, it's you know, a window into other countries. It could be someone from the UK had gone over to, say, India. How do we know? Unless you share it, nobody knows.
What would you like to say to other relatives of other missing persons? Do you have any advice for them?
I'm pleased that there's a second campaign going out. There are so many unidentified bodies around the world, and we need to reunite their families. If you've got a missing family member or just a relative that's vanished through the cracks of society and not seen them for a while, just check up on them. Don't assume they're all right. Then report it to the police immediately.
What would you like to say to Interpol and other police organizations in the 6 participating countries, but maybe also in other countries that aren't participating yet? Do you have a message for them?
Please jump on board. This is so important. They are brothers, sisters, mothers, aunties. They are people. Just because they don't have a name, they are people. Please jump on board.